Hi, everyone. Welcome to the March Wireside Chat. I can't believe it's March already. Tonight, we have a special guest, instructor Tracy Crow Weidemaier. I'm going to just introduce her briefly, and then we'll talk about her career as a writer and the sorts of things that she does. Tracy Crow, a former Marine Corps officer, is a literary agent and the president publisher of MilSpeak Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the creative writing endeavors from within the military community through writing workshops and a traditional publishing pathway for books authored by military veterans and family members. That is so cool. She is a former assistant professor of journalism and creative writing and the author-editor of 6 books, including her award-winning memoir, Eyes Right, Confessions from a Woman Marine, and the historical biography with co-author Jerry Bell, It's My Country Too, Women's Military Stories from the American Revolution to Afghanistan, which earned a starred review from Library Journal. In addition to her role as an online MFA adjunct here at SNU, Tracy teaches in the low residency MFA program at Queen's University of Charlotte in North Carolina. Currently, as a work-for-hire author, Tracy is writing the first historical biography of women in Air Force Special Forces from 1990 to 2022, scheduled for release in 2027 from Air University Press. She lives in central North Carolina on 10 storybook acres with her husband, a Major League Baseball lifer, and their 3 pups, Rocky, Hope, and Fenway. So Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. And thanks everybody for carving out some time this evening and joining us. I really do appreciate it.
I think that you generously put some information into the chat, but I'm going to copy and paste it in again because I think it came too far up in the chat stream for people to see it. So
wow, you're
I'm
fast
putting
at that. Good.
I'm putting in the URLs for Tracy's webpage and for the MilSpeak Foundation. And since I did put in the link to the MilSpeak Foundation, why don't we start and talk a little bit about what that is and what the aim of the organization is, how you started it, and what you do there.
Okay, well, happy to. First of all, MilSpeak Foundation was actually founded by another woman Marine, Sally Parmer, back in 2009. Sally and I met at Queen's University of Charlotte at grad school, and which really flipped everybody out because it was strange enough back then in 2005 to even have one woman Marine, much less 2. And women Marine don't often meet each other unless they're actually active duty and on a base. And even then, we don't really see that many of us. So that was really kind of odd. So Sally, after graduation, went back to her station in Beaufort, South Carolina. By this point, she was retired, also disabled, and she started writing workshops. And they were so popular that she decided that she would create a foundation. And then she sought the 501c3 nonprofit status. So a few years into that, Sally remarried, and her husband had this horrific motorcycle accident that left him paralyzed from the chest down. So
Oh, no.
the foundation, yeah, she was taking care of him, and by the way, his name is Harry and she's Sally, but she was taking care of him. And the foundation floundered for a number of years. So then in 2017, she looked me up and said, how would you like to take over the reins of MilSpeak Foundation and bring it back to life? Because I was teaching writing workshops at that point to veterans all over the country. And so it just seemed like a good fit. So I took it over in 2017. And this is basically what we do. We offer writing workshops to military veterans, active duty, and family members of veterans. So the spouse, the grandchild, the dependent, any of those that qualify that are actually family members of veterans. So not only do we offer creative writing workshops and everything free, but we also offer a publishing pathway into the world for select books. And we're a traditional press. So our veterans or family members pay nothing. We are just like the Big Five. We pay for all the copy editing, all the proofreading, all the cover design. They pay nothing. So, but we only publish 6 to 8 books a year. but we've gotten starred Kirkus reviews, editors pick from Publishers Weekly. I mean, we're very, very proud. I'm very proud because I
Yeah,
select them all.
no, you
But
should be. I mean, that's awesome. So
yeah,
are you also the primary editor of the books that you select for publication?
well, when I decide that I'm going to take a book, like I'm going through machinations right now with an agent, and he has two writers that have co-written an incredible memoir I could not put down. And so when I select that, then I have to determine, since my time is all pro bono for this, how
Yep.
much time is that this project going to take me from a developmental editing standpoint? And if I feel like it's very close and only needs a few things here or there, and I really do feel like this book deserves a pathway into the world, then I'm going to sign that book. I'm going to do everything I can to get that book. And then it goes to a copy editor. So after I've done a little bit, of work with the editors, with the authors, then I will offer a contract. If we come to that agreement, then it goes to our copy editor. So it's that close before I even ever make an offer. But
Wow,
that's
but
kind of the way it is in the publishing world anyway.
absolutely. I mean, hearing all this just makes me realize more than I already did that, we're very fortunate to have you in our program. And I mean, you wear all of these hats of the different important roles throughout the, publishing process. And it's incredible insight that you're able to give to your students. And I hope our guests tonight about what's involved in all of those various roles.
Well, I really do love it. And I'm kind of stunned too by how much, just experiential, experience. Just the experiential knowledge that I've picked up just in the last 5 years of publishing books. I knew nothing. Other than my own books going through their process with other publishers. And most of 4 of my 6 books have been published by the University of Nebraska Press or their imprint, Potomac Books. So I had that experience, and I've been with agents, and I can tell you some stories there.
But you yourself have been an agent.
I am an agent. I'm
Yeah.
still an agent.
Right.
But I knew nothing about like how to get a book on Ingram Spark and how to get it and what all the metadata was and how to figure all that stuff out and then what to price it at and everything. I had no idea 4 or 5 years ago how to do all this. And so what I've picked up and learned over the last several years is just, sometimes it really shocks me too.
So did you pick all that up? Just by doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have some friends who have their own presses. And so, I've turned to them every now and then for a little bit of insight, but I actually designed the covers. I designed the first mock-ups for every single, I decide what the basic elements are going to be for every cover design. And then I will show an author 4 or 5 mock-ups based on what the author has told us that he or she would really like to see or what they had envisioned for their book. And then once they've kind of moved into one direction or so, then I pass it along to my professional designer. And Michelle is such an artist. And she will take whatever I've amateurishly mocked up and she turns it into gold and has won awards for our book covers.
That's fantastic.
She's amazing.
So, and does MilSpeak also publish fiction, or do you just publish like nonfiction, memoirs, that sort of thing?
We do our best with memoirs, and I think that's because every author who has written a memoir comes with basically some sort of built-in audience, family, friends, colleagues, that sort of thing. So we do our best with memoirs, but we have published a lot of fiction as well. And I've even published our first poetry collection, which I am so proud of. Yeah, she's actually a professor at the University of Kentucky. So this is her first poetry collection. And she only had about, I think, 60 pages. And I said, no, I want this. I want a book. So I pushed her. We got to about 114 pages. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous collection of poems. She's a military wife of a special the Rangers, 82nd Airborne. So she's got lots of poems in there about that, lots of poems about the waiting, about the family being left behind, the transitions that families go through. And then her father too was in the Army. So she's got the intergenerational aspect in her poetry. But it's
Mhm.
called The Indignity of Knowing. Ah,
Great
beautiful.
title.
Thank you. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's got a long tagline, military life and verse or blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Sorry, I can't remember it all.
So I want to ask you to kind of trace, if you can, um, the twin passions of your life that have at least coincided in MilSpeak, and in the project you're working on now, which is the Women in the Air Force project. So talk a little bit about your writing path, talk a little bit about your military path, and how those two came together. And before you do, I just want to remind everyone that's listening to please type your questions in the chat so that I can surface them to Tracy.
Thanks. Well, let me just start off that I was the last person in the world or in my family that anyone ever expected to join the military, much less the Marines. And that whole story is chronicled in my memoir, Eyes Right, Confessions from a Woman Marine. Why? But basically, it was because I came from a home with domestic violence, an alcoholic father, and I was really searching for a way out in Roanoke, Virginia, and was really searching for an opportunity to be independently on my own. I don't know why I thought the Marine Corps meant independent, but because it was nothing but rules based. But on the other hand, I kind of liked that because I knew I was already used to being the child of an alcoholic, kind of like knowing where the rules are. I needed to know where the boundaries were, because that's where you're safe, when you're, living with an alcoholic. You need to know where those boundaries are. So I ended up in the Marines. And I ended up in public affairs, which in the Marine Corps, when you're enlisted, you're called a combat correspondent. Now, this was in the early 1980s. The only combat we ever saw was all the training during the Cold War against the Soviets. We trained, hold on, something popped up here. Okay. We trained every day, it seemed, for the war that never really came, and which was good. But, we trained for that all the time. And so as a war correspondent or as a combat correspondent, I could pick and choose whatever I wanted to do every day, which was really kind of cool. If I wanted to go do a story on helicopters on the CH-53 Sea Stallion, I could call up the squadron and say, hey, I'd like to come down. Are you flying today? And I could go down there and hop on the CH-53 Sea Stallion and go wherever they were going for the day and get a story out of it, come back, put it in the base newspaper. So it was really 10 years of an incredible experience. And so I went
And I
through the
mean,
ranks.
you were getting like on the job training as a
Exactly.
journalist and writer then as
Yes,
well.
exactly. Yeah. And all that possibility is still out there and available now. I mean, that's what public affairs specialists do. We were trained at the Defense Information School, basic journalism, all the way through photojournalism, advanced photojournalism. So we knew back then how to even process film, rolls of film, stuff that they don't even do anymore. But, we were in dark rooms. We were doing all kinds of stuff. It was amazing. Just an amazing experience. And then went on to become commissioned as a warrant officer. So let me just fast forward this. So I ended up leaving the Marine Corps after 10 years with an honorable discharge. But what I always kind of describe as under conditions that were less than honorable. So when I left.
Now I need to hear more about that. It sounds very juicy.
It's in my book. It's in my book. Okay. So anyway, I went for 15 years afterward, never discussing my life as a Marine. I buried it. And the only time it ever came up was on a job interview. If somebody said, oh, I see, on a resume, I see you were, and I tried to get in and out of that subject as fast as possible because I did not even want to discuss because I was so afraid of the question, why did you get out after 10 years? So then fast forward, I'm in my 40s. My daughter is a sophomore in college, and I have an opportunity to finally finish the college degree that I kept getting interrupted, from duty stations and this and that. This was way before the internet was ever invented. So, I finally had an opportunity to go back to college, and I ended up at this really lovely, small liberal arts college in St. Petersburg, Florida, called Eckerd. So Eckerd College requires creative writing majors, which I had decided I would be because, I'd been writing in journalism. I thought always wanted to write a book. I need to be in creative writing. You have to take a memoir class. So I'm in there and I'm writing all this stuff I think I want to write about, like my grandmother's passing. My grandmother had come to live with me her last few years. And, there was all this stuff about that and my grief and it just wasn't landing. I wasn't sticking anything. And so on the way out of class one night, I was talking with my professor, Helen Wallace, and all of a sudden she says, Tracy, did I hear something about you having been in the Marine Corps? I was like, I said, yeah. Now this is 10 o'clock at night because adult classes at Eckerd College went from 5:30 to 10:30. So this is like 10:30 at night. It's out dark. We're out in the parking lot, I said, yeah. And she said, well, why did you get out? I was like, dang it. That's the question I don't want to ever talk about. And I don't know what happened. I swear to God, I think it's the powers of Helen Wallace. I mean, she is this amazing poet and this amazing memoirist and professor. But for some reason, maybe it's because we were standing there under a street lamp, which was like the light of God, the cone of God or whatever. I could not lie. It was like she had lassoed me with the truth rope or something. And I just suddenly spilled the beans. And I told her the whole reason. And her eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I just couldn't shut up. I kept telling her the story. And I fast forwarded through everything. I mean, it probably didn't take me 7 minutes, but I'd get through the whole reason. And that's why I left. And I thought, oh, she is never going to think the same of me again. And she reached out for my arm, my forearm, and she looked at me and she said, you will write this story. You will tell this story next week in my class. And I was like, no, Helen, I can't tell that story. Yes, you will. You are going to write this story.
Wow. Good for her.
I know. I give her credit everywhere I go. Every time I tell this story. I mean, I love this woman. She's the best instructor I've ever had. And, but I went home and I was like, I can't tell that story. But what I'll do is I'll find another piece of my military life and I'll tell that story until I warm up enough to tell the story.
Right.
So I went back, and I started she started pulling these excerpts out of me and she taught me how to write a memoir by finding the most pivotal points in your life during a time span. And that's how I learned to teach memoir. And I teach it to veterans that way. You're finding your timeline, you're pinpointing the most pivotal moments of your life. Then you're analyzing each one of those for all the various levels of conflict, all 5 of them. They've added a 5th one, with person versus the surreal or the, supernatural. But
right.
Besides the person
man versus AI.
Yeah, exactly. So then you hone in on one of those and you write that one out, and then you go to the next one and you write that one out. And then she helped me find the thread that tied the whole thing together. So that became my undergraduate thesis. And then after that, I knew I wasn't done, had to go to grad school, had to really get it polished. Yep. And so that's how I ended up writing. But let me tell you this one part, if it's okay. So I found an agent, the most prestigious, oldest New York agency, period. And he was in love with my book. And then he did nothing for 2 years. And this is why I always tell people, especially my students, you don't sign with the very first person. You really have to ask why. You really have to do your research. And I thought I had. No. But I ended up placing the book when he finally left the business. I ended up placing it years later with the University of Nebraska Press, which it couldn't have been in a better place. I mean, seriously, they were fantastic and I learned a lot from the process, but they didn't tell me on the release day, which was April 1st, 2012. They didn't tell me that the publicist had placed an excerpt that she personally had carved out. So on April Fool's Day, in 2012, I get this text at 7 o'clock in the morning from my mother who had just learned how to text. And she said, Tracy, wake up. you're the lead story on AOL. I'm like, what? So I jump out of bed and I check, AOL HuffPo, and there I am, like, oh my
Wow.
God, with the great big 1980s glasses. They used the worst photo possible. And then under the most salacious headline. Well, I just knew I was going to end up fired from the college president that day. And all my students, it was the newspaper night. So all my students were telling me, Tracy, don't read the comments. Whatever you do, don't read the comments because you're going viral. Don't read the comments. We got finished with the newspaper, went back home about 5:30 the next morning, and I sat there and I read every single comment. And they were slut shaming, horrific comments, horrific. And all of a sudden, after 400 and some comments, it suddenly
God.
dawned on me, nothing they said was triggering me.
Mhm.
Nothing was affecting me. I had become Teflon. And the reason, this was why I discovered the power of writing. The reason I had become Teflon was because everybody was talking about a version of Tracy Crow that no longer even exists. They weren't talking about this Tracy Crow. They
Mhm.
were talking about the young 20-something Tracy Crow who made a really strange left turn after a lifetime of right turns, And so they were talking about that version. I judged her too for like 30 years. So why wouldn't they? And
Mhm.
that was when suddenly I discovered the healing power, that when you really do the self-examination and the self-reflective writing, and you really learn about the motives, and you really analyze why you would have done such and such, what scripts from childhood were you operating off of. And when you really do that hard work, then you take your power back. You
Yeah.
own your own story. You own the story. And that was what I was able to go out and tell all these other women veterans who are struggling through moral injuries and sexual assaults, and of course our male veterans too, going through exactly the same things. So not that I went through the sexual assault stuff, but plenty of harassment. But the thing is I'm able to tell that story to say, see, this is what happens when you do this work. It's powerful. You
Yeah.
take your story back. And even the veterans who turn their real life into fiction and are able to rewrite an ending or rewrite the outcome or rewrite whatever, they feel they're back in control,
Yeah.
of that story and of themselves. So anyway, I've sucked all the oxygen out of the room, but
No,
that
not
tells you a
really.
little bit about where I started and how I ended up with that book anyway.
I'm going to come back to what you were just saying, but before I do, I want to pull a couple of comments, questions out of the chat. Um, Here's one that says, I'm a combat veteran who writes poetry. My works don't talk much about military things. Is that a prerequisite within your foundation as far
No.
as starting a communication with you?
No, it's not. No. We're not so much concerned about the content as we are about offering a pathway, period, for quality work. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the work's got to be top quality. I mean, we wouldn't be pulling in Kirkus, starred Kirkus reviews and editors picks if it wasn't. But it's not so much about the actual type of content, whether it's about the military or not. No. I mean, I've published a fantasy. I'm publishing a 3-book fantasy for one of our authors who's the granddaughter of a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So, she also
That,
happens to be the daughter-in-law of Marilyn Robinson.
oh, wow. The writer,
Yeah,
Marilyn Robinson.
the Pulitzer Prize winner.
Wow.
A totally different kind of writer because there's no genes involved there. It's in-laws,
Right.
but she's a super writer. So I mean, I'm publishing her fantasy. So
Very cool. Here's another one. Have you thought about writing a children's picture book about a child/children coming to the understanding of their parents/parents in combat?
I've heard recently about someone who has done just that, and I don't recall who it is, but I do remember just mentally cheering that was being done, that there was somebody putting that out there in the world. I don't know if she was self-publishing. I just remember that. It's definitely a great idea,
Yeah.
and there's always plenty of room for others. So, if this questioner is interested, mean, I haven't delved into children's literature, although I do represent an internationally best-selling children's book, writer. But I haven't written anything myself.
So let me just piggybacking off of that for a second. How do you separate like the various hats that you wear, the roles that you play? Like, for example, as an agent, right, you're interested in acquiring work and selling it for the benefit of the author. As an editor, you're interested in acquiring work for your own press. As a writer, you're interested in selling your work either to an agent or, well, you don't sell it to an agent, but having an agent represent you to sell it to a traditional publisher for the most money that you can get. So how do you keep those roles separate, or do you?
I do. There has been a little bit of crossover, and I'll explain to you about how that happened. But I do keep them pretty separate. Most of the time, the people who contact me keep it separate. They tend to either know me as either I'm with MilSpeak Foundation because they've seen me online or social media or whatever, and so they know I wear that hat, or they have found me through Query Tracker or the American Association of Literary Agents, and they're coming to me just because they are looking for agency representation.
Yep.
So I that's, they pretty much separate themselves. But I started off as an agent, even though I was already with MilSpeak Foundation. I had not started the publishing part, restarted the publishing part of MilSpeak. In fact, I didn't know if I ever would. I thought when I took over MilSpeak, I would just primarily focus on the creative writing workshops because I didn't know anything about how to get a book out into the world, really, personally. Plus, we didn't really have the funding for that. So all of a sudden, one day, a donation came in from a very good friend who said, I've just mailed you a check for such and such. I don't care what you spend it on. I don't care if you put it in your personal account, but I've seen you teach these workshops and I think you deserve an opportunity to go out there and do some more. And I called her and I said, wow, this is an incredibly generous gift. What do you think about us publishing books and getting that world, that imprint started back up again? So that really excited her. So here was the thing. At the time, I was representing 4 or 5 authors who had military ties. Some of it was military material, some wasn't. And I had been, I was their agent. And we had gone through everybody. I mean, hey, let's face it. It's dead on submission sometimes. You're out there, you're trying your hardest. You start at the top tier, you work down, you get down to the indies and the university presses, and you can't place it for some reason. And you have no idea why, none, because you know the quality is there. But you do know why. It's always based on marketing numbers. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's always based on marketing numbers. So anyway, when I started the imprint back up, and we'd already gone through everything with 4 or 5 of my clients, I said, look, we have to admit we're dead. We're dead here. However, how would you feel about being my first published authors with MilSpeak Books? Well, they were all thrilled to death. So that was the time that is actually crossed. But that's the only time it's crossed because, for example, I mentioned earlier, I'm going through contract negotiations right now with an agent who brought me this co-written memoir. And I mean, he's found me through MilSpeak Foundation. He didn't even know I was an agent. So now agents are coming to me. I had another agent who bugged me for almost a year about her client's book. She could not place it anywhere. And she is a very, very well-known top agent. And when I read the book, couldn't put it down. And I was like, geez, why can't you place this book? She said, I have no idea. I said, please, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. And I said, I'm so sorry I put you off for like a year, but I mean, I was buried at that time. And I just couldn't even read another thing at that moment. So I do keep the role separate. Sometimes there's a little crossover, and when it is, it's a win-win for all of us. That's the way it happens.
I think you said something there that was really good for a lot of our listeners to hear, which is that you can do everything right, and you can have a fantastic book and have it in the hands of a very capable agent, and still nothing can happen. And it's nobody's fault necessarily. And now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it is somebody's fault, right? Like with your agent, your first agent who just sat on your book for 2 years and didn't really do anything. Well, that was obviously, that was bad. But a lot of other times the agent is doing everything they can possibly do, and working very hard on behalf of the book. The book is fantastic. Everybody knows that. And in fact, a lot of times the editorial rejections that you'll get will be something like, this is a terrific book. I wish we could publish it. I know you'll find a great publisher to take it. But you don't, because everybody says that. So well, I
Yeah,
mean,
I think
what
some,
is your advice to like, aspiring writers who may one day face that sort of thing?
mm, well, here's the advice that I always give my clients, and that is that what I want you to do is the best job possible of releasing all expectations of outcome.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that sounds very Buddha, but seriously, that's where the suffering comes in at.
Yeah,
When we
it's true.
start hooking on to, oh my God, now I've got my agent. This means we're going to sell the book. Oh,
Hmm.
my dear God, do I wish. I don't even want to know what my percentage is because it probably would be too depressing. Because we are out there with so many other agents, and I'm working from home, so I don't have the advantage of whining and dining,
Hmm.
publishers in New York. I don't even know if they still do that really at this point, but um, there is that in world in which certain big five editors, they know lots of these agents, they've done lots of deals with them before, so they're more apt to look at their stuff than they are something I send. But I will tell everybody this: look, I can't guarantee anything other than I can open the doors, and I can promise you that your book will be in the final rounds of consideration because the quality of it is there. And I have
Hmm.
matched you, I've matched you with the most appropriate, publishing houses for your material. So in every single case, every one of my clients has made it into a final round of consideration, to the point where we are sitting on pins and needles waiting for the
Hmm.
call, only to find out that of the two books they were considering, it went to another one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I cannot tell you how heartbreaking that is. In almost every case, we have finally found a home for almost everything, but not everything. Some books we've had to just say they're in the proverbial drawer, for maybe another time, and keep writing the next one.
Hmm.
Um, but what I always say is, please let go of your expectations. You just an attachment to a certain kind of outcome, a certain level of advance, a certain level of publisher. I mean, just let it go and trust that your work will find its way into the world, at the best time with the best house. I always say too, I really never know why some books are like that and other books that are much better quality can go on and on and on and stumble along for a couple of years before they ever find anything. I don't know. I don't know if it's fate, kismet, past karma coming back on every. I mean, I don't know. I
Yeah.
just know
Nobody does.
that, no, I just can say this: if you know your quality of the book is there, trust that when the right time comes along, the door will open. The
Yeah.
door will open for all good quality work that's meant to be in the world. That I truly believe.
I actually believe that as well. And I mean, really, the only thing a writer can control up to a point is the quality of their work.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it. That's all you can control. And you've got to be open-minded enough to seek that help, and then be willing to integrate the feedback, but you've also got to have a good, strong gut feeling and trust factor. So it's kind of
Yeah.
hard. You want to be true to your story. You want to have trust your own gut, but at the same time, you've got to seek some professional help from people who
Yeah.
really do. This is where your professional developmental editors come in at, who can maybe help pinpoint something. But when I'm pitching something, I start pitching only to 5 at a time. I mean, there are a lot of agents who will just throw it all out there at one time. And I don't do that. I pitch 5 at a time and I wait to get feedback, because if we get some interesting feedback, it may mean
Hmm.
that we want to adjust something, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'll go to the next 5 and then the next 5. I mean, now that takes a while. I could throw it out there for 25 all at one time that are qualified presses for one of my clients, but within a couple of months we're dead. It's over. And
Yeah.
maybe all this feedback came in and it was too late, because you're not going to get another chance. It's like one and done. You're not going to get the chance to go back, unless you really personally know the editor. You're not going to get that chance to go back and say, would you please take one more look? It doesn't work that way.
It's better now, really.
It's better now. I promise. I will say that the editors who say yes to being willing to read what I send them, because you have to ask them. I mean, just like writers are querying me, I have to query the editors. I have to say, hey, would you be interested in taking a look at blah, blah, blah? And I've got to make my pitch, just like writers have to make their pitch to me when they're seeking representation. And so now I've been doing this enough that they know that it's worth taking a look at, because I'm also a freelance developmental editor. So plus I've taught for a long, long time writing. So when I send them something, it's going to be ready to go. It's just a matter of whether the editor connects with the voice on the page, or
right.
The marketing team comes in and says, yes, we can see the numbers for this. We can see how we can make it, blah, blah, blah.
Yep. So in all of this, where do you find the time to do your own writing?
Well, I'm one of those compartmentalization kind of like experts. I think I always tease everybody and say I'm also a Capricorn, which means the only thing I know to do to have fun with is to work. So, that's it. That's all I do is work. My husband, fortunately, baseball guy, he's also a Capricorn. So he understands me, he gets me, and he just knows that I'm working. But what I do is I take out chunks of time. And so, for example, on this Air Force book, historical biography I'm working on, it's requiring me to interview at least 75 women who I had to find and contact information. So I have a scheduler on Zoom, and they can go and schedule their own interviews. And so I get a 2 days notice, when something's coming up. And so then I'm able to kind of move things around if I need to. But I gather so many of those at a time. Then I transcribe all those interviews. There are hour-long interviews I do with them. Then I transcribe them, and then I go in and I just work through the transcript. Because right now it's the first draft for this first year of the 2-year project. I'm just working through the first draft, and they want to see some progress of 10,000 words every 45 days. That's not that bad, especially when I'm actually writing off of transcribed interviews. It's not that hard, to actually pull it all together. And so, that's kind of how I do that. I'll take big chunks of time toward the last 10 days. I always make sure that I'm finished with a deadline at least 2 to 3 days ahead of a deadline, in case I've done that ever since I went back to undergrad. Always finish 2 days ahead. But I will start really carving out big chunks of time those last 10 days leading up to the deadline. But most of what I'm doing right now in this first draft is just transcribing the interviews into a narrative structure, and I'm adding the historical context. So there's all that research that I have to do for the historical context of the beginning of Desert Storm, and then the beginning of the Operation Enduring Freedom, and all of that. Does that help? I compartmentalize.
No, yes.
I'll tell you what, you want to know, and I'm not kissing up to my boss here, but you want to know my number one priority is getting my grading done all the time. My SNU students are my
correct answer.
Well, I swear to God, they are my number one priority, are my SNU students. So my agency clients, I can work all around. My MilSpeak authors, I can work all around. My writing, but my SNU students come first.
Well, that's heartwarming to hear, and I know that's true.
I hope they feel that. I hope they feel it.
I'm sure they do. True. Yeah, I'm sure they do. So let me pull another couple questions out of the chat here. I've had numerous classmates here that are veterans and intend to use their experiences in both their fiction and nonfiction. What organizations or groups would you recommend they seek out for support with other military writers? Are there groups you know of that cater to veteran authors? Oh,
there's so many. There's so many. And you're welcome to, email me and I'll send you a list. I'm terrible when it comes to on the fly coming up with names, but there's the Military Writers Association. There used to be ODART 30. I think that's still going on, but it was also attached to a literary journal. There's Midwest Review, which actually is run by a good friend of mine, Randy Brown, who goes by Sherpa. But he actually puts together poetry. He does mostly, it's all poetry, and he'll do poetry anthologies, and they're all written by military veterans. But that's called it's either Middle West or Midwest Review, but just email me so I can send you a list, or maybe I can send a list to Paul and he can find a way to get it out there. But Randy Brown is amazing. In fact, he was teasing me like, what are you doing going into poetry? You know, that's my thing, right? Why are you publishing a poetry book? So I said, I'm only going to do a couple. I promise, Randy. You're the military poetry expert.
All right, here's another question. Do you think an MFA would help someone to become a professional ghostwriter for novels and children's picture books? I said that's interesting combo. I start next term for my MFA program here. Angel, very much looking forward to working with you next term. And I'm really nervous about it as a writer. I'm working on a dark fantasy novel. Professional ghostwriter. Have you ever done any ghostwriting? I've done a little ghostwriting as well. It's
yeah. I've done that too. I'll tell you what Dennis Lehane told me. And I'll name drop Dennis Lehane, author of Mystic River, Shutter Island. Dennis and I went to the same Eckerd College, but like 20 some years apart. But he came back to co-teach fiction one year, and he and I were kind of teaching together this young group of fiction writers who were undergrads. And somebody asked him, do you really need an MFA? And he said, no, you don't need an MFA, but let me tell you what an MFA will do for you. He said, an MFA will shave off probably 10 years of your learning curve if you take it seriously. And he said, so think about it. You know, that's what you can go out there, you can steadily read novels and do this and try to find workshop groups and try to get feedback and this and that. And he said, or you can get an MFA and be really, really focused on learning craft from professional expert teachers and writers. And he said, it will shave 10 years off of your learning curve. And I thought to myself, who had just finished an MFA at that moment, practically, I thought, oh my God, he is so right. Because I felt like in my first residency at Queens, I had already learned more about writing in 7 days than I had known my whole life.
Yeah.
So will an MFA help you as a ghostwriter? Yes. Yes, because you'll learn lots of discipline. You'll learn how to set goals. You'll learn how to set boundaries around your life and your time too, because you're going to be doing these assignments. Plus, it will also help you with credibility getting that job when you can tell someone who's looking for a ghostwriter that you have an MFA.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I mean, our MFA also, teaches students about the business side of things, which a lot of MFAs, I mean, I don't have an MFA, I have an MA, but when I got my MA, I guess back in the 80s, there was no business side to it. It was just, you had to figure that stuff out for yourself later.
That's what I love about SNU. And that's what I tell the 608 students, that the 608 class, by the way, that's coaching and editing, or editing and coaching. I forgot how it's worded, but in that 608 business class, and I'm telling people all the time that for many, many years, going through the MA, going through the MFA programs, it was all about writing in the craft, which is great. Then they would start to maybe dip over a little bit into some of the teaching, but to become an instructor in a program, even undergrad, required a book from a notable press, at least one published book, in addition to your MFA degree. But the really savvy MFA programs like SNU's started offering these business tracks. And that is just so impressive because, you need to be able to find ways to support yourself as a writer. And I mean, if you love writing, you love talking about writing, you love being around that creative world, then why not find a way to make a living at it, which, doesn't always come for every writer in book sales. Trust me.
No, I mean, I've published 6 novels, and they're all from, the Big Five, imprints of the Big Five. I don't make, I have never made my living from my writing per se. You know, I have freelance editing jobs. I have copywriting jobs. Now I'm an instructor and a dean here at SNHU, and I've taught writing workshops and stuff like that. So I had to cobble a lot of stuff together, just like you, right? You wear a lot of
Yes.
hats. I think a lot of writers that, you know, kind of make a living in the writing world are wearing a lot of hats.
And that's one great thing about that 608 class, because we are showing students how they can actually build a developmental editing or a coaching business or all of that, you know,
Yeah.
but one of the things that the course designer is so brilliant at doing is always coming back and saying, so how would you integrate your own personal writing time into this editing coaching business? And I am so impressed with that, because let's face it, a lot of times when you leave an MFA program, you get out into the world, and then next thing you know, you're not writing anymore. And so one of the things I love about that course is that it's constantly asking the student to reflect, how are you going to fit this into your writing life? Making
Hmm.
sure that that writing life is still the focus. You
Yeah.
know, one thing that my Queen's University MFA director said all the time, still says, Fred Libran, he's always said, writing is a game of attrition. Don't attrish.
Is that a word? I don't know.
No, that's why we've laughed at it so much all these years. But he's like, don't attrish. I mean, it's like common sense. It's a game of attrition. Don't attrish. We're
Hmm.
like, oh God, okay, writer.
So, couple more, and you know, just entree new, there's some possible changes, interesting changes coming for 608 that I would
Oh,
probably want to talk to you about at some point.
okay. All
Little,
right, great.
little, little preview of
Yeah,
perhaps
see,
coming
just
attractions, but no spoilers.
okay.
Um, okay, so what piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to write a memoir?
Okay. Let me see. Where would I start with that? First of all, I would say read lots of memoirs. Read lots of memoirs, especially if you're just starting out. Read lots of memoirs that are just considered the best in the world. And I can give you a list of names of people. Then I would say that you would want to pick up the book, which is called, I think it's Your Life as Story.
Mhm.
That's the textbook that I was introduced to at Eckerd College in my introduction to memoir. And it actually provides you pretty much everything that you need to know about how to braid a memoir, how to braid storylines together, how to find your stories, and you know how to create these plot lines and discover like what are the pivotal moments in your life, the ones that you really feel were the life-changing ones, the ones you want to explore and create for the memoir. One of the hardest pieces, one of the hardest things anybody ever said to me was from a former brother-in-law. That marriage is gone, but it was actually very helpful. And I was writing my memoir and I was writing like crazy, and it was I was revising after grad school. We were at the beach. We went to the beach every summer, all of us together. And all of a sudden, Stuart says, "Well, why do you think anybody's going to want to read your about your life?" And I was like, why is anybody going to want to read about my
Mm.
life? You know, but it really caused me to go back and open up one more layer of vulnerability that I realized I had not gone to yet.
Mhm.
And that was the piece that I was missing, was when he said, well, why do you think anybody would be interested in reading about your life? I thought, you know, if I'm not going to be completely vulnerable on this in this project and on this page, he's right. It's going to flop. It's going to go nowhere. And so I had to go to that place, you know, and as we say, no tears for the writer, no tears for the reader.
Mhm.
And it was tough. I mean, it was tough, but that's how I got it to a place where it was able to be published. I hope
I
I've
mean,
answered
yeah, no,
some
that's a
somebody's
fantastic answer.
question.
And I mean, I feel as though what you're talking about, that kind of vulnerability, is something that's equally important in fiction and
Absolutely.
memoir. But the difference is that with fiction, and maybe this makes it a little bit trickier even in fiction because you still have to be vulnerable even though you're kind of a step removed and you have these characters there that are sort of, I don't want to say that they're masks or puppets or anything like that because they're not. They have their own, they have their own issues, they're their own people, but still you're being vulnerable through them. But in a memoir,
Yeah, but
you're
also,
vulnerable through yourself, aren't you?
yes and no, because kind of keep in mind that even in memoir, you're creating a persona on the
Yeah,
page,
yeah,
just as you would for fiction. And there are techniques for learning how to do that. Um, I would say that there's a crazy thing going on right now where the one point of view that most editors nowadays do not want to read, if it comes from a debut novelist, they don't want to read first person point of view. And the reason they say they don't want to read first person point of view from a debut novelist is because the debut novelist typically is still writing what they know.
yeah.
And because they've never trained in memoir, they don't realize all the holes that they are leaving as they are
Interesting.
attempting to create this first person, because that first person point of view novel should read
Mhm.
as if it's somebody's memoir.
Yeah. Wow, I never thought about that before, but I mean, it really seems as though fiction writers could learn quite a bit from reading memoirs, not just those writing in first person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me move on to another question here. I'm not sure if it has already been asked, but I got here late. Well, we'll ask it anyway. Do you have
Okay.
any advice regarding time management? Well, we did actually sort of talk about that. I'm a mom with ADHD who works full time while doing this program, and I'm looking at how others manage their time to see what works best. And Tracy talked about her ability to compartmentalize.
Yeah. And I was also diagnosed with ADD when I was in my late 50s. I think maybe from a head injury that I had from a head-on collision with a drunk driver, one time many years ago. And I think some of that just kind of messed up. But so I understand. I will tell you that when I'm in a writing phase, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm writing until 8 or 8:30 in the morning. Everybody has a different way of doing it. And I always, when I was teaching undergrad at Eckerd, I would do an exercise. I would create a portion of the course where the students would have to go write in 3 different locations. And they would have to then self-reflect on what it felt like to write in all 3 of those different locations. And that was helping them to home in on what kind of writer they were. Were they the kind of writer who could write in a Starbucks with all bedlam going on around them? Or were they somebody like me who has to go into a dark cave and just with the same soundtrack of John Mayer playing all the time, where I don't even know the words anymore, but as soon as I hear it, I just go into writing mode in a cave. So, but once you find out what kind of writer you are, then you stop fighting the process. And you can ask this question of everybody, but the best answer is you have to find your process, your best
Mhm.
time. There's a great article I share with my advanced fiction or advanced literature students, and that is the 10-minute writing, finding 10 minutes and opening up for 10 minutes on something on a page. And it's amazing what you can get done in 10 focused minutes. And they've all tried it and come back and said, oh my God, this was a great idea. And then I don't feel so hampered. I feel like at least I got something done. And then I always tell everybody, look, if you can't write every day, which is okay, find a way to touch the business. Find a
Mhm.
way to stay connected, even no matter how busy you are. Read an article, connect with a writer friend, do something that touches the business every day, even if you can't find that 10 minutes to dabble or play around or open up creativity. I hope that was helpful.
No, these are all fantastic answers. I'm gonna jump over to one more question here since we're coming to the end of our hour. Um, what's the most important component of a pitch in your opinion? I just realized that your that your husband is a baseball player, deals with pitches of a very different kind. That's probably what brought you together.
He was working giving private lessons tonight with a pitcher. Yeah, he's amazing. He's been in baseball his entire adult life, and my daughter is married to a former pretty well-known linebacker.
Oh
who's
gosh, wow.
out of the business. Yeah, you would recognize him because you and I are, well, I'm a lot older than you are, but you would know him. But at any rate, yeah, pitching. All right. Here's what I always say about pitching and queries. I'm not one of those agents that spends a whole lot of time worrying about what your pitch or query reads like. If it's written well, if you've told me what the word count is, if you've told me what the genre is, if you've told me what the subgenre is in your comparables as you see it, if you tell me that it's this meets that, it's corn of thorn and roses meets blah, blah, blah. That tells me that you know something about it and you've actually worked on it. If you tell me you have a book proposal, I am going to say send it right now. And that's something I'm really big on. Nowadays, editors want book proposals, fiction, memoir, everything. So if you tell me you already have a book proposal or you're willing to send me one, I'm going to love you and I'm really going to give you extra attention. So it's not so much like you've got to wow me like with some kind of marketing spiel, you know, like what I might find on the back cover. Just tell me, you know, hey, I'm wondering, are you interested in a 64,000 word spec fiction that I'm seeing as blank, it meets blank? And, you know, comparables would be such and such. And I've got a book proposal if you'd like. I'm sold.
What goes into a book proposal?
I'm happy to send you my template and you can forward if you want.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah,
I got it from one of my
writers community.
Yeah, I got it from my agent years ago. So,
okay.
You know, and then I just use it.
I've heard, I'm sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. Basically in the book proposal, and I've used the same proposal and actually sold 3 books on spec through the University of Nebraska Press, meaning I'd never written a word of the book, but I showed them a proposal and they bought the book right there, you know, and then they gave me a year to write the book, each one of them. So, but if you've already written the book proposals can help you wow your agents because your agents need to send that to a publishing house, to an editor, to wow them. So you would see something like an initial summary, which would be like a couple of paragraphs. Then you're going to see like the word count. There's a special, you know, there's a set format for it. I'm happy to share it with you. And then you would show like 1 or 2 sentences per chapter. You know, so if you've already written
synopsis.
Well, you do have a synopsis in there, no more than 1 or 2 pages, but then you do chapter summaries.
Okay.
So your chapter summaries are like anywhere from 2 to 3, and they're just touching on the nut, the beat of that chapter all the way through. And then the last part of it is going to be you as the author in terms of your platform, if you have one, or marketing, who you know, who you're willing to talk to, who you feel like would buy the book that you already know. You've already done talk shows, whatever. You're willing to hire a publicist, any of that. I know I'm talking fast because we're running out of time.
I know, exactly. Well, I'm scrolling through the questions to see if there's one more question I can grab. I mean, the way that you describe the book proposal, I mean, if you're like the kind of writer that kind of, you know, a pantser rather than a planner, then you're at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of like coming up with a book proposal, right? Because you don't like to outline your work before you write it.
Right. But if you've already written the book and now you're ready to start pitching agents, you want to have that book proposal finished.
Yes. Yes. Then you go into your book and you break it down, right?
Yes.
And in fact, in the exercise of doing that is probably going to reveal things about your book that you hadn't understood before.
Exactly.
I mean, you might
surprised. You'd be surprised how many writers don't even know. Well, fortunately, our SNU classes are teaching them, but a lot of the writers I see when they come to me outside of a SNU class, they don't even know where subgenres they're in. They don't even know what their comparables are until I send them the book proposal template and tell them to go finish this, and then I'll talk about it. And then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know where my own book fit in the market. Now, we teach our SNU students, you know, how to do that. But the average writer out there who's querying me, they don't know. They don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's one of the advantages of you know, this program, I think, for sure. Well, that is the end of our hour. Tracy, I want to thank you so much. I mean, I honestly, I feel like we could have gone on for another half an hour or so. Maybe we would love to have you back at some point. And do you have anything you want to plug? Do you have any articles, any books that are, I mean, I know we sent people to your website earlier. I'm assuming they can purchase anything from there.
You can just Google me on Amazon and you'll see all the books pop up, except for the one I have under a pen name, but I won't tell you. But you can, it's a military conspiracy thriller. But you'll see all of the ones that have been published by Nebraska Press.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Thank you
Yep.
for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And
Bye.
thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next month, I hope.
All right, everybody. Good night.